Imagine flying over the vast, endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean in the midst of World War II. The sun is high, the sky looks calm, yet danger lurks in every direction. Your instruments flicker. Radio silence stretches unnervingly long. And suddenly, you're gone. No crash, no distress call, no trace. This is the story of the US pilots who vanished in the Pacific. Men trained to survive, to fight, and to conquer the skies. Yet somehow, they simply disappeared. Some never returned. Some left behind only whispers of what happened. And their stories remain a mystery to this day. The Pacific theater was unlike any other. Battlefield, endless oceans stretched for hundreds of miles. Tiny islands dotting the horizon could mean life or death. Storms appeared without warning. Compasses failed. Radio signals vanished. And the enemy was always close, watching. During the war, hundreds of missions were flown over these unforgiving skies. Most returned safely, some didn't. And for those who never came home, the official explanations often didn't make sense. Flight logs simply ended. Messages went unanswered. Families waited for answers that never came. Fellow airmen carried the weight of fear, guilt, and unanswered questions for decades. And yet, despite the passage of time, the mysteries remain as haunting as ever. In this documentary, we will explore the true events behind these disappearances. We will revisit the missions, the pilots, the chaos of war, and the ocean that swallowed so many. And we will ask the question that has haunted generations of historians and families alike. What really happened to the US pilots who vanished in the Pacific? The Pacific Ocean is not just vast, it is unforgiving. During World War II, American pilots faced a battlefield unlike any other. Thousands of miles of open water stretched between tiny islands, and there was no margin for error. One wrong turn, one misread compass, or one unexpected storm could be fatal. Unlike Europe, where terrain and cities provided landmarks, the Pacific offered nothing but sky and water. Pilots were trained to fight, to survive, and to navigate under extreme pressure. But the ocean had its own rules. Sudden typhoons could appear without warning, capable of tearing planes apart in seconds. Radio signals often failed, leaving pilots stranded and isolated. Even the most experienced navigators sometimes became hopelessly lost, drifting for hours or days. Their fate unknown. Fuel was another silent enemy. Long distances between islands meant pilots were constantly calculating consumption, sometimes flying to the very limits of what their aircraft could handle. There was no room for hesitation. A miscalculation could leave a plane descending into the open sea. Invisible from the sky, and often unrecoverable, enemy forces added yet another layer of danger. Japanese aircraft and naval patrols were a constant threat, but surprisingly, many disappearances occurred even without a single enemy engagement. Weather, navigation errors, and mechanical failures claimed lives as silently and efficiently as any fighter plane. It was in this hostile environment that some of the most mysterious disappearances occurred. Pilots would depart on routine training, missions or reconnaissance flights, and never return. Sometimes the only evidence was a last garbled radio message fading into static over the waves. Sometimes, not even that. These missing pilots left behind families who waited in agony, colleagues who questioned every decision, and a military that had to keep searching, hoping for answers that often never came. Their absence was a heavy burden, and their stories became part of the Pacific's unsolved mysteries. Understanding the dangers they faced is essential, because only by appreciating the vast, merciless expanse of the Pacific, the unpredictability of the weather, and the limits of technology at the time, can we begin to comprehend how so many skilled pilots simply vanished. And as we will see, one mission in particular would change everything, becoming a symbol of this haunting mystery. That mission was Flight 19, the training flight that disappeared without a trace, leaving the Navy, the families, and history itself with questions that have never been fully answered. Flight 19. Even today, the name sends chills down the spine of anyone who studies World War II aviation. It was a routine training Mission 5 TBM Avenger bombers, 13 men departing from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, bound for a standard navigation exercise over the Atlantic, or so it seemed. Shortly after takeoff, the pilots reported that their compasses were malfunctioning. Confusion set in quickly. Radio communications became fragmented, with voices overlapping, static cutting through their messages. The men were highly trained, yet no training could prepare them for the ocean stretching endlessly beneath them, a place that would swallow them whole over the hours. Flight 19 drifted further from its intended course. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, struggled to maintain orientation, repeatedly trying to correct their path. He radioed the base, admitting, "We can't find our position." That simple statement has echoed through history, a haunting reminder of how quickly a routine flight became a nightmare as night fell. The last transmissions grew increasingly desperate. Fuel levels dropped dangerously low. The men were forced to consider ditching their planes into the open water, an almost certain death. And then silence. 5 planes vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no bodies, nothing. Not a single hint of where the pilots had gone. The Navy immediately launched a massive search and rescue operation. Aircraft and ships combed thousands of square miles of ocean. Days passed, weeks passed, but the search yielded only debris from a PBM Mariner patrol plane, a craft sent to locate Flight 19, which had itself crashed under mysterious circumstances. The ocean had claimed them all. Flight 19 became more than just a missing training flight. It became a legend, a symbol of the dangers of the Pacific and the mysteries that the war had created. And for families, colleagues, and historians, the questions never stopped. How could trained pilots vanish completely? What exactly happened in those final hours? And why was the ocean so mercilessly silent? Flight 19 was not the only case, but it remains the most famous. It represents all the men who flew into the Pacific skies and simply disappeared. Their stories are intertwined with the unrelenting power of nature, the limits of technology at the time, and the vast, unforgiving expanse that was the Pacific theater of World War II. And as we continue, we will explore the other disappearances, the theories that emerged, and the grim reality faced by pilots who ventured too far into the unknown mysteries that, in many cases, remain unsolved to this very day while Flight 19 captured the world's attention. It was far from the only case of US pilots vanishing in the Pacific. Hundreds of men took off on training missions, reconnaissance flights, and combat patrols, never to be seen again. Some disappeared within sight of land. Others were last heard over open water, their final words fading into static. One of the greatest challenges was navigation. Pilots relied on compasses, dead reckoning, and limited radio guidance. But the Pacific was a maze of islands, reefs, and shifting currents. Even small errors could place a pilot hundreds of miles off course. In a matter of hours, the ocean itself became an enemy, vast and unyielding. In some cases, planes were spotted descending toward tiny, uncharted islands. Yet search teams arrived too late, survivors were few, and evidence was often destroyed by storms or tides. For families back home, the wait was agonizing. Letters and telegrams confirmed only that their loved ones were missing in action, leaving a void that would never fully close. Pilots also faced the invisible threat of mechanical failure. Engines overheated, fuel gauges malfunctioned, radios cut out. Without warning, even the most skilled aviators could not overcome a sudden storm, a failing engine, or a compass gone awry. In the Pacific, the smallest mistake could be fatal. And then there were the strange cases, reports of pilots disappearing in areas where no enemy forces were present. Some aircraft were never found, not even debris. Others were discovered years later, in locations that made no sense based on flight plans or known currents. These incidents fueled speculation, giving rise to stories of mysterious forces and unexplained phenomena. One striking example involved a reconnaissance squadron dispatched to map enemy positions. Only one plane returned, the others vanished, without a trace, despite favorable weather and no enemy engagement. Investigators were baffled. Logbooks, radio transcripts, and flight plans offered no explanation. The men had flown into the Pacific, and the Pacific had claimed them, silently and completely. These disappearances were more than statistics. They were tragedies, leaving scars on families, units, and the Navy itself. Every missing pilot was a reminder of the ocean's unforgiving nature and the limits of human technology. Every unanswered question deepened the mystery of the Pacific skies. And yet, amidst the fear, confusion, and loss, the US military continued to fly missions, to train new pilots, and to push forward in the war. For each vanishing, there was a determination to understand, to find answers, and to honor those lost. But some questions remain unanswered to this day, and some pilots remain lost in the endless blue horizon of the Pacific. Next, we will delve deeper into the most haunting cases, examining the stories of those who vanished and the theories that have persisted for decades. Because the truth behind these disappearances is stranger and sometimes sadder than fiction. As we continue to examine the disappearances of US pilots in the Pacific, one question keeps emerging. Were these losses simply accidents? Or was there something more mysterious at play? Navigation failures were often cited But the patterns were puzzling. Pilots sometimes reported their compasses spinning inexplicably. Instruments that had been reliable would suddenly fail, leaving men disoriented over open water. Some historians point to magnetic anomalies in certain regions of the Pacific, areas where traditional compasses could give false readings. But even that doesn't explain every disappearance. Weather played a deadly role. Pacific storms could rise in minutes, catching even the most experienced aviators off guard. Monsoons, typhoons, and sudden squalls turned the sky into a trap. Visibility would drop to zero, and pilots flying at low altitudes risked crashing into the ocean or unseen islands. A storm was often the last thing a pilot ever saw. Mechanical failures added another layer of danger. The aircraft of the time were robust, but not infallible. Engines could overheat, radios could die, and fuel gauges could be misleading. In the middle of the ocean, a minor malfunction could escalate into disaster in a matter of minutes. Then there were cases that defied easy explanation. Some pilots reported strange lights over the horizon, unusual cloud formations, or sudden disorientation that could not be attributed to storm or mechanical failure. Flight 19, for instance, communicated a sense of bewilderment and confusion that has never been fully explained. Their last words hinted at something beyond ordinary errors, and in some cases, pilots may have attempted emergency landings on tiny islands, only to vanish without leaving evidence. The Pacific is filled with uncharted atolls, reefs, and dense jungles. A plane that went down could be swallowed by vegetation, sand, or surf before any rescue team could reach it. Some disappearances involved groups of planes. Squadrons flying together would suddenly find themselves scattered, lost, or crashing into the sea. Radio transmissions, when they came at all, were often garbled, reporting coordinates that made no sense. The ocean was vast, the maps incomplete, and the pilot's skill could only do so much against such odds. These navigation failures, weather challenges, and mechanical issues tell part of the story, but not the whole. They explain how planes were lost, but they don't explain the enduring mystery of why so many were never found. Even after extensive searches, wreckage remained elusive, and entire crews vanished as if swallowed by the sea itself. In the next chapter, we will explore what happened to those who may have survived crashed, captured, or stranded, and how the war, the ocean, and the enemy combined to make rescue and recovery almost impossible. Their fates are as haunting as the disappearances themselves. While many pilots were lost to the ocean, others may have survived long enough to face an even grimmer fate. The Pacific is dotted with thousands of islands, some charted, some unknown. For pilots who managed to ditch or crash land, reaching land did not guarantee safety. Some may have encountered Japanese forces, who captured a handful of downed airmen as prisoners of war. In other cases, local islanders may have found the men. But the chaos of war often meant there was no way to communicate or rescue them. In many instances, records were incomplete, destroyed, or never made at all. There are accounts of pilots stranded on tiny atolls, forced to survive with minimal supplies, navigating jungles, swamps, or hostile terrain. Some may have perished before anyone could find them, their planes hidden by thick vegetation or washed away by tides. The vastness of the Pacific ensured that many simply disappeared without a trace. Military records hint at missions that were more than routine training. Some flights carried sensitive reconnaissance assignments. If planes went down during such missions, the government often classified details, leaving families and historians with even fewer answers. The secrecy surrounding certain flights added layers of mystery that persist to this day. The ocean swallowed evidence. Debris drifted for miles before disappearing. Aircraft were broken apart by storms or currents. Survival was a fleeting chance. For those who never returned, the line between disaster and disappearance blurred, creating stories that still fuel speculation despite decades of investigation. Recovery efforts were limited by the sheer scale of the Pacific. Thousands of square miles of water, countless reefs and atolls, and unpredictable weather made finding wreckage extremely difficult. Some planes were only discovered years later, often with partial remains, offering only fragmentary answers. Yet, even when wrecks were found, the mystery of why the pilots were lost in the first place often remained unsolved. Human error, mechanical failure, and environmental hazards were common explanations. But the combination of factors was as deadly as it was unpredictable. These lost pilots remind us of the human cost of the Pacific theater, a place where survival depended on skill, luck, and sometimes sheer fate. The ocean claimed the trained, the brave, and the fortunate alike, leaving families, comrades, and the military grappling with unanswered questions. Next, we will look at the rare cases where planes were found, the discoveries made decades later, and how modern technology began to shed light on some of these long-standing mysteries. The war ended and the Pacific slowly quieted. The search for missing pilots didn't stop. In some cases, wreckage was discovered years or even decades after the planes vanished. Sunken aircraft, isolated island crashes, and scattered debris began to tell pieces of the story long after the missions had ended. In 1946, recovery teams combed remote islands and coral atolls, uncovering remnants of aircraft that had disappeared during the war. Some contained skeletal remains, personal effects, or flight logs that provided the first tangible clues about the fate of the missing pilots. For families, these discoveries were bittersweet proof of death, yet a painful closure that had been delayed for years. Modern technology has since allowed historians and researchers to revisit cold cases. Sonar mapping, satellite imagery, and advanced diving equipment have located previously unreachable wrecks. In some cases, planes lost in the 1940s were found, almost perfectly preserved underwater. Their crews finally identified through painstaking investigation. Despite these advancements, many mysteries remain. Some aircraft are found far from their intended flight paths, raising questions about navigation errors, storms, or other unexplained factors. Sometimes the evidence contradicts official records, leaving historians to speculate on what truly happened during those final flights. The emotional impact on the families cannot be overstated. Decades of uncertainty gave way to partial answers, Yet grief and loss remained. Parents, siblings, and children who had held onto hope for years finally had confirmation. But it came at a painful cost. Some discovered personal belongings that had been recovered from the wrecks. Small tokens of lives cut short, haunting reminders of the human price of the Pacific War. These discoveries also reshaped our understanding of the Pacific theater. They revealed the scale of danger pilots faced, the challenges of long-distance navigation, and the unpredictability of the ocean environment. Each plane found helped to clarify history, yet also reminded us of the countless men who remain missing, their fates unknown. Ultimately, these post-war discoveries provided both closure and more questions. They highlighted the courage of the pilots who flew into uncertainty and the vast, unforgiving environment that claimed so many. The ocean had kept its secrets for decades, but slowly it began to whisper fragments of the truth. Next, we will explore the classified reports, silent files, and intelligence documents that remained hidden for years, adding another layer to the mystery of the vanished pilots. Why the government kept some answers buried, and what it tells US about the war in the Pacific, even as the war ended and recovery efforts continued. A number of records and documents remained classified, hidden from public view for decades. The military knew that some missions involved sensitive reconnaissance, testing new technology, or experiments that could compromise national security if revealed. For many of the vanished pilots, these classified files contained the only explanations for their disappearance, but the public, and often even their families, were denied access. Flight plans were altered in secrecy, reconnaissance missions disguised as training flights, and the fates of certain crews were quietly buried in military archives. Some planes were lost during operations so sensitive that disclosing their locations could have revealed intelligence strategies, weaknesses in navigation systems, or methods of covert communication. The ocean became a convenient cover, a place where mysteries could remain undisturbed and secrets preserved. Historians who later gained access to declassified files discovered fragments of information. Mentions of pilots sent on untested routes, aircraft carrying experimental equipment, and communications that hinted at disorientation caused by top-secret technologies. These revelations helped explain some disappearances, but only deepened the intrigue for others. The secrecy also meant that some disappearances were never fully investigated in real time. Mission logs might have been incomplete, radio transcripts classified, and search operations limited to avoid drawing attention. As a result, many pilots were officially listed as missing in action, a term that carried both respect and sorrow, but left the truth obscured. This silence fueled rumors and speculation. Families searched for answers in vain, often decades later. Researchers pieced together clues from scattered reports, sometimes contradicting official accounts. The combination of classified information, vast distances, and the unpredictability of the Pacific created a perfect storm for enduring mystery. Understanding the role of classified operations is crucial. It explains why some disappearances remain unsolved, why some planes were found years later, and why some missions left almost no trace at all. It also reminds us that the Pacific was not only a physical challenge, but also a theater of secrecy, where truth was sometimes hidden deliberately to protect strategy and intelligence. Next, we will explore the theories that have emerged over the years: speculation, myths, and the stories that refuse to die trying to make sense of what happened to the pilots who vanished, and why their fate continues to fascinate historians and the public alike. Over the decades, numerous theories have emerged to explain the disappearances of U.S. pilots in the Pacific. Some are grounded in fact, others in speculation, but all speak to the enduring mystery of these missions. One of the most common explanations is simple yet chilling: navigational errors and fuel exhaustion. Pilots flying over hundreds of miles of open water could easily become disoriented. A slight miscalculation could place them hundreds of miles off course, leaving them stranded over the ocean with dwindling fuel. In such cases, the outcome was often inevitable. Then there are the theories involving weather. The Pacific is notorious for sudden storms, violent typhoons, and unpredictable wind currents. Pilots could be tossed off course, caught in turbulence, or forced to ditch in rough seas. Even seasoned aviators sometimes had no chance to survive. But some cases sparked more unusual speculation. Flight 19, for example, became associated with what later became legends of the Bermuda Triangle. While most historians dismiss supernatural explanations, the mystery has endured, fueled by unexplained radio transmissions, unusual navigational readings, and the complete disappearance of aircraft without a trace. Other theories suggest encounters with enemy forces that were never documented, experimental missions, or equipment malfunctions that were classified to protect national security. These secretive elements added layers to the puzzle, making it impossible to establish a single, definitive explanation for every loss. Then there are the personal stories: pilots who were known to take risks, push limits, or stray from assigned routes. In some cases, the very bravery and initiative that made them heroes may have also contributed to their disappearance. The combination of human courage and the Pacific's merciless expanse created a deadly, unpredictable environment. Despite all these theories, one fact remains: many planes and crews vanished without a trace. The mystery persists because the ocean itself is vast. Secrets were kept by necessity, and evidence was often lost to storms, currents, or time. These disappearances continue to captivate historians, researchers, and enthusiasts alike because they defy simple explanation. In the next chapter, we will examine the most likely realities behind these vanishings: the combination of environmental hazards, human error, and mechanical failure, offering a sobering look at what probably happened to the pilots lost to the Pacific skies. After decades of investigation, historians and aviation experts have pieced together the most likely explanations for why so many U.S. pilots vanished in the Pacific. While mystery and speculation have captured the public imagination, the truth is often more sobering than myth. First and foremost, the Pacific is a harsh and unforgiving environment. Long stretches of open water leave no room for error. Storms can develop in minutes. Winds can push planes off course, and visibility can drop to near zero. Even the most skilled pilots could be disoriented in these conditions, and a small navigational error could quickly turn fatal. Mechanical failure played a critical role as well. Aircraft engines in the 1940s were reliable, but not foolproof. Fuel systems could fail, radios could malfunction, and instruments could give false readings. Pilots flying at the limits of range had little chance to recover from even minor issues. Human error, though rarely the only factor, also contributed. Fatigue, stress, and the psychological strain of flying long hours over a hostile ocean could cloud judgment. Many pilots were young, often in their early 20s, and while highly trained, they were humans susceptible to mistakes that could have deadly consequences. Some losses were compounded by isolation. Even if a plane went down, survivors might be stranded on uninhabited islands or lost at sea, far from any possibility of rescue. Currents, tides, and the difficulty of locating small wreckage meant that recovery was often impossible. Many pilots were simply swallowed by the ocean, leaving no trace behind. It is also worth noting that some missions carried secret or experimental objectives which could have led to unreported accidents. Flights that involved reconnaissance, testing of new aircraft, or covert operations sometimes resulted in losses that were never fully documented. Adding to the lingering mystery, taken together, these factors explain the tragic reality. The combination of environmental hazards, mechanical limitations, human error, and the immense scale of the Pacific made it almost inevitable that some pilots would vanish completely. The myths and legends are compelling, but they often obscure the harsh truths faced by those who flew in these perilous skies. Next, in our final chapter, we will reflect on the legacy of these pilots, the men who were lost, the families who waited, and the enduring lessons that their disappearances leave for us today. Their courage, sacrifice, and the mysteries surrounding their fate continue to resonate, reminding us of the unforgiving nature of the Pacific and the cost of war. The pilots who vanished in the Pacific did not disappear into history. They live on in memory, in archives, and in the hearts of families who never stopped hoping for answers. Their courage, skill, and sacrifice remind us of the immense challenges faced during World War II, and the human cost of the war's most unforgiving theater. Memorials now stand to honor these men, from plaques listing the missing at naval bases to cemeteries and museums that tell their stories. Each name represents a life cut short, a dream unfulfilled, and a family forever changed. Even decades later, the stories of these pilots inspire awe and respect for their bravery. Modern recovery efforts continue to reveal fragments of the past. Sunken planes are occasionally located, remains are identified, and decades-old mysteries are slowly clarified. Technology has brought some closure to families, but many pilots remain lost, resting silently beneath the vast blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Their disappearances also serve as a lasting lesson about the power of nature and the limits of human technology. The Pacific, with its storms, currents, and vast distances, was as much an enemy as any opposing force. The bravery required to fly these missions cannot be overstated. And the losses endured highlight the thin line between life and death in wartime aviation. Today, we honor the courage of those who flew into the unknown. We remember Flight 19, the reconnaissance squadrons, the training flights, and every mission that never returned. These pilots became part of the mystery of the Pacific, leaving behind questions that will echo through history. They remind us that even in a war defined by strategy and technology, the human element, skill, bravery, and sacrifice remains central. As we reflect on their stories, one haunting question remains: how many of these men, lost to the Pacific, still wait beneath the waves? How many stories are untold? How many truths remain submerged? And how many lessons are left for us to discover? Their legacy endures, not just as pilots of war, but as symbols of courage, mystery, and the enduring human spirit. The U.S. pilots who vanished in the Pacific may have disappeared from sight, but they will never vanish from memory.